So welcome to our brand new series, Building Blocks. In this series, we will be talking to industry experts related to real estate, and we will be asking and clarifying some doubts and questions which we have in our mind all the time. We will be speaking to mortgage professionals, lawyers, home inspectors, staging consultants, accountants, architects, etc. It gives me a great pleasure and honor to have with me here today Mr. Manish Kapoor from Kapoor Law Firm. He has been an awesome support to our clients all this while. And I have dealt with multiple lawyers in my real estate career. Manish ji stands out for his awesome and very prompt communication. So thank you so much, sir, for being here today for your time.
Thank you.
Here. How are you doing?
All good. Thank you so much. Yeah.
So I'll just get started. So the first one, which I have and all the time people have in their mind is that how does the real estate closing process works? So on the day of closing, when the closing happens, what all things happen? If you could just elaborate sequentially, like what all happens?
Sure. So there are technically two kinds of transactions we are talking about right now. One is the purchase transaction, one is the sale transaction. Purchase transaction on the day of closing, just briefly, what happens is we get the funds from the lender, and hopefully we have the funds from the buyer, and then we use those funds and send those funds to the seller's lawyer. And then once the seller's lawyer has those funds, they will release the transfer on the land registry office system, and then we proceed and register that transfer, and that's when a transaction is supposed to be completed. On a sales side, normally we get most of the things done prior to the closing. So on the day of closing, we're just waiting for the funds from the buyer's lawyer. And once we receive the funds, we will release the transfer on the land registry office system, and then the buyer's lawyer will go ahead and register. And once, like I said, the registration happens, that's when the deal is supposed to be closed.
And all of this fund transfer generally takes place electronically, or you go and draft and go to various banks and
so either one of the two ways. So there are actually three ways of transferring funds. One is certifying the funds and sending it over to the buyer's or rather the seller's lawyer by the way of sending a courier. The second way is obviously going to our bank first and then certifying the funds. And if the seller's lawyer is at the same bank, we'll deposit the funds in their account or go to another bank, whichever bank the seller's lawyer has his trust account with. We go to that bank, deposit the funds, and then the third way is obviously where we transfer the funds electronically through wire. So these are the ways we transfer the funds on the day of closing.
And generally, by what time the closing happens? Or is there any role which a buyer or a seller plays on that day, where they have to meet you on that day?
So that's a worst case scenario where maybe the mortgage instructions have come in too late, or there's some development that's happened where we need our clients to sign documents with us or deliver the funds to us on the day of closing. We ideally want to get all these things addressed before the closing and not wait till the day of closing, because there's a lot that happens on the day of closing behind the scenes as well, and it's best for us to be prepared in advance and not wait till the day of closing. So yeah, normally that's how things work.
Okay. So the second one here is that we know that there's a concept of title search. So when we put agreements, there is always an acquisition date, that is title search date.
Yes.
Which generally is 10 or 12 days before the completion date. Yeah. So what exactly is title search, and what do a lawyer does, especially for a buyer? Title search.
So title search is a very important part of a real estate transaction. So a buyer's lawyer conducts a title search, and the most important aspect is to find out whether the seller is the actual owner of the property or not. Other than that, a title search could reveal that the title or the property has certain notices or applications or liens or mortgages that are registered against the property, and the buyer's lawyer addresses those issues with the seller's lawyer on or before the closing.
Yes.
And one more thing title search does is it helps identify the legal description of the property.
And in case there are any issues, the seller deals with the claimant.
So yes, so if there are issues with the property, then like I said, the buyer's lawyer addresses those issues by doing a requisition to the seller's lawyer. And then the seller, because they're the owner of the property and they're supposed to provide a clear title to the buyer, then the seller and their lawyer will work to address those issues and provide a proper response to the buyers.
And all of this takes place transparently without, buyers getting involved as such. It's all.
If so, that's where the buyer's lawyer is important, because it's his duty to make sure that the buyer gets a clear title. So if and if it's a normal transaction, the buyer's lawyer will advise the seller that these are the issues, but we are taking care of these issues. But if there is something specific that comes up which needs involvement from the buyer, then the buyer's lawyer should discuss those issues with the buyer and try to come out with some sort of a solution.
No. And then the other one which I have here is that when we are getting very close to the completion date,
Yes.
is there any activity which a buyer let's talk about from buyer standpoint first. Is there anything which buyer needs to do as a homework or in readiness of the purchase?
Yeah. So the buyer ideally in a purchase transaction will deal with 3 or 4 professionals, right? So they will deal with their real estate agent, their mortgage agent. Sometimes they'll deal with their accountant as well, and then the lawyer. So my advice to the buyer would be to just follow their instructions. And if they do that, it'll be quite a smooth closing for them, right? From a lawyer's perspective, now, what I recommend the buyer to do is to make sure that their mortgage is in place and that the lawyer's office receives the mortgage instructions at least a couple of weeks prior to the closing, right? And then the buyer will also make arrangements to have a home insurance for the property that they're purchasing, and make sure that the lawyer receives the home insurance policy prior to the closing. They'll also make sure that they make themselves available to sign the documents with their lawyer before the closing. And one more important aspect is to deliver the closing funds to their lawyer a day or 2 days prior to the closing.
And as I understand, the home insurance is absolutely mandatory for getting the completion title for freehold properties.
Yeah.
So, however, for condo properties, is it a sale and mandatory requirement, or how does that work?
So the condo corporations do have a condo insurance policy in place. However, we normally recommend our clients to have a home insurance policy even for a condo. And there are some lenders who do require the buyer to have a home insurance, a condo insurance as well for any property that they purchase.
Yeah. Okay. So now the next one, Manishji, what I have is that when we talk about our agreement of purchase and sale for a buyer, what are the most important elements from a buyer standpoint which they should ensure that when they're signing on our APS, though we are also part of that in a big way, but from legal standpoint, from your standpoint, what all they should just ensure that all check boxes are there.
Obviously, the most important thing is the purchase price and the deposit that buyers look into more carefully, other than the other aspects. But the other aspects are quite as important as well. So if the buyer is buying a property and there are chattels and fixtures that he believes that he's getting, say if they're blinds or if there's chandelier, or sometimes the seller is offering to sell the TV as well. So if they are under the assumption that those items will come with the property, then they need to make sure that that is incorporated in the agreement of purchase and sale. Also, if there are any rental items, to make sure that those rental items are addressed in the agreement of purchase and sale. If the buyer is looking to make certain renovations on the property or do some exterior work on the property, then maybe try to get a survey from the seller if the seller has a survey. And then if they're not sure about their mortgage or their financing, or not sure about the property, then maybe have those clauses for the inspection and financing on the property. If it's a unique property, I also would like to see that there's a condition for a lawyer's review. Most of the agreements don't have a lawyer's review condition, but it really helps us if it is a unique property for us to see and address those issues with the buyer prior to the purchase.
So I think what I'm hearing is that everything should be well documented in the agreement of proceedings.
For sure.
So when we execute that, to ensure that there is nothing verbal about it,
Absolutely.
everything is written, and then you can back it up.
Yeah, because the agreement of purchase and sale is what gives the lawyer the authority to deal with certain situations and address those issues that the buyer or the seller.
Yeah. And then what is their title insurance? So that's another component. So we have multiple closing heads and costs, which are buyer incurs,
Yes.
do a completion. So one of them is a title insurance cost.
Yeah.
So, and as I understand, it is mandatory to get a title insurance, or
So it's not mandatory, but most lawyers, including us, I don't close transactions without my client agreeing to have title insurance. However, it's not mandatory, but like I said, many good law firms have incorporated that policy of not closing if their client is not going for a title insurance. It's a one-time premium, so it's like you pay it once at the time of closing. Depends on the purchase price of the house. And then you don't pay like a monthly premium. And normally your title insurance is valid throughout the ownership of your property. So you just get it once and it stays valid till you own the property.
and what all it covers, like how it helps and safeguards buyer.
Yeah. So title insurance is ownership insurance, right? It covers any title related issues that might come up after the closing. One very common example, and you might have heard of this recently, is fraudulent transactions. So a fraudster has sold or remortgaged the house without the owner knowing about it, right? So if those issues come up, the owner is completely protected. He would be reimbursed if he has suffered any losses because of it. Other issues could be survey-related issues if they come up, or if the previous owner or the seller has not paid his utility or his tax bills, and the new owner comes and finds out that there are these unpaid bills, then he can stake a claim with the title insurance company.
So I think it's in best interest of any buyer to have title insurance in place.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And another thing which I wanted to bring up today is that what are the easement rights and what are the legal obligations of the buyer in a real estate purchase? So like when I'm signing on an agreement where I'm saying that, I want to buy this property at this price, this is the deposit amount I'm willing to pay. And these are the conditions.
Yeah. So legal obligations of a buyer is the most important obligation is to be able to close on the day of closing, right? If the buyer is unable for any reason to close on the day of closing, then he might have to request an extension from the seller. The seller might agree to an extension based on certain terms and conditions and additional costs, or the seller could decline an extension and sue the buyer for non-performance and any losses that the seller might have suffered.
Okay. Is it possible that the seller is not able to fulfill his obligation or their obligation to vacate the property on the closing date? So are they also in breach of contract?
That's correct. There have been very few instances of that happening, but there have been some. And yes, if the seller is not able to close on time, then the seller is liable.
Okay. So, Manish, this last one, what I have and the most important is that what inspired you to become a lawyer and what you like about your profession most.
So what inspired me when I was a kid was watching some movies and seeing these characters as lawyers who are helping their clients and, kind of resolving certain major issues. So that was quite good. And then later on, when I was in college, I had a couple of law-related subjects, and I scored really well. I topped the college, so it was kind of a nudge for me to look into this as a career. And what I enjoy most is closing deals like a purchase or a sale transaction, and seeing my clients being happy and content with the successful completion of the transaction. It brings a lot of happiness. Other than that, I've been really lucky to work with a lot of first-time home buyers and new immigrants who've come to this country, and realizing their big dream to buy or own a house, and just being in that journey with them, being able to help them fulfill their dream. It gives me a real high.
I can understand. Yeah. I truly appreciate your time,
Thank you.
Daisy, today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
for being here.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure.
Same here.
And so, friends, I'll see you in the next episode. And as you would have noted, a lawyer plays a critical role, be it a selling transaction or being a purchase transaction. Lawyer has a very key role to get the process as smooth as possible for us and take it to the closure. So I will see you next time and wish you all the best. Stay positive and stay motivated. Thank you.